Good evening and welcome to Thursdays with NAMI. My name is Peg Morrison and I will be your host for the evening. I'm the Director of Programs with NAMI North Carolina. That's the National Alliance on Mental Illness of North Carolina. Thursdays with NAMI is our way of building community and building conversations around the issue of mental health. I'm glad you're here with us. Tonight's topic is brought to you by popular demand. Whenever we ask folks what they would like to learn about on Thursdays with NAMI, schizophrenia has come up as a theme time and time again. Our guest, Larry Wanucha, has lived with the illness and will share his story in just a few moments. First, a word from our sponsors. Thursdays with NAMI is funded in part by the North Carolina Department of Health and Human Services Division of Mental Health, Developmental Disabilities, and Substance Abuse Services through the Community Mental Health Services Block Grant Fund. As usual, the first part of our show will be a conversation with our guest. At some point, we'll show our video of the week, and then we'll spend time answering your questions. Moving right along, Thursdays with NAMI is recorded. If you have a friend who couldn't be with us tonight, please let them know it is never too late. Thursdays with NAMI will be on our YouTube channel within a week or so. All right, without further ado, it is my pleasure to introduce Larry Wanucha, a good friend of mine. We worked together for 10 years in Toledo, Ohio. He was diagnosed with schizophrenia and dependence on marijuana in 1979. He's been clean since 2003. Currently, he's employed in two areas, both at a mental health housing agency and a state hospital, both in Toledo, Ohio. Larry's a really cool person. I always thought of him as a Renaissance man because he is an artist and he has a long list of interests and accomplishments. So, Larry, how you doing tonight?
Very good. Thanks for having me, Peg.
All right. How are you taking care of yourself these days?
One day at a time.
There you go. Always a good answer. So I know you're good at telling your story. Tell us your recovery story in a nutshell.
Well, my problem started in a nutshell as a young person, and I had a lot of symptoms with anxiety, depression. But after high school, I went to college for a year and then had to leave because of my mental health. And then I started to get into art, and I had a lot of anger during that time in my early 20s, and I was living at home, and my dad said I had to leave because I had younger siblings and wasn't a good influence. I was smoking marijuana, so I moved to New York City to study art. And during that time in Manhattan, I had a psychotic break. I could see things and feel things. I was a victim of a crime, a robbery, and during that time I had a near-death experience. While that happened, I was okay physically, but it very much traumatized me. And then, long story short, I got back to Toledo with the help of family members and was hospitalized for 6 weeks at a local hospital. There, my doctor put me on a long-term injectable Prolixin or flufenazine, and I've been on that medication since then, since 1979. I think that's like 41 years now. They lowered the dose over time. Early on, I was over medicated, had a lot of side effects. I slept 16 hours a day for 5-6 years, and then slowly started to feel more energetic and better, and went to psychosocial rehabilitation programs and saw a psychiatrist, a nurse, a case manager, vocational programs, went back to school and earned some degrees. And but over a long period of time, I've managed to gain a lot of insight through life experience, and have managed now. I supervise a team of 3 people for supportive housing people. We house people with severe mental illnesses and who may have drug and alcohol dependencies, and So we support them to keep them housed and encourage their recovery. And then in the evening, I work at the local state hospital, North Coast Behavioral Health Care, which isn't too far from where I live. And I work as a certified peer supporter. And I encourage recovery there, do client rights. And I love both positions. I'm very busy. But because of the COVID and whatnot, I have, and there's nothing on television. So when I come home, at least on the weekends, I read, and I've been reading novels and historical novels and enjoying getting back to actually reading. So in a nutshell, that's where I've been.
Yeah, and I know I've heard you tell your story before, and work was a big part of your story. I remember you've talked about waitering and sort of learning to be around people. Could you say a little bit about that? I always found it kind of fascinating how you emerged from living in a group home to now owning a home and having a master's. It's a really interesting road you've traveled.
That's a good question. Fills in the gaps. Early on, I knew I needed to develop my social skills, and I still do. I struggle with that. I've never been able to feel really confident in that. But my first psychiatrist said that out of the two that I've had, said that there's nothing wrong with putting money in your pocket, earn some money, and that should be one of your goals. And so the first job I got after I finished my 2-year degree in business management, I wanted to wait tables. I always wanted to do that. I was in my 30s by the time I did that, and or late 20s, and I started to wait tables, and I enjoyed socializing with the waitresses and the customer contact. And I won some contests for a highest average check and things like that. I worked at the Olive Garden for a while in Toledo and Frisch's, where I learned to wait tables. It was one step at a time where I was. So it was all about accepting myself, building on my strengths, and that's kind of how that worked out.
Mm-hmm. Neat. I want to give you a little feedback. Of course, when we were practicing, I didn't hear any sound issue, but now there's a little bit of like a tapping noise or a clicking. I think it's when you're sort of moving around. I'm not sure, but hopefully that will resolve itself soon.
Okay.
And you've sort of covered this question. What do you do at both of your jobs? Does illness ever interfere with your work?
Well, recently, like I say, I get a long-term injectable for my psych meds, and I wanted to see if I could wean myself off that. And I asked my nurse practitioner if we could, I get a shot every 27 days, every 4 weeks, 28 days. And so we spread it out over 6 weeks instead of every 4 weeks, the injection. But over a period of 3 or 4 months, I started having symptoms again, and I had to take time off from work. So I was able to snap back pretty well after I got my next injection and maintained it every 4 weeks, and I've been well ever since. So other than that, my mental health has been pretty consistent. I do have bad days and good days, and days when I just don't feel well. And it's just, I try to stay in the moment and practice health and wellness.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's always an ongoing goal for me too, is staying in the moment. It's so easy to live in the future or the past, but the more we can be mindful and present, I think it's easier to feel content. It's easy to feel like my best self. I do see a question in our chat box. How did you learn to accept yourself? And this person writes, I struggle with that. I think we all do.
That is a very good question, and I'm glad that you asked that because that has been the basis of my recovery. Because I think it starts with my spiritual perspective, which is the basis of it, self-acceptance, that I am who I am, and nothing more, nothing less. And you need to start with where you're at. But I believe in God, and I believe in Jesus, and I believe in the higher power, and I believe in healing energy. And I know that when I accept myself, I feel good about myself, even though I'm flawed. Uh, Self-acceptance is the core, I don't know, rule of my recovery. And I I know there's more I wanted to say about that, but I know that I become whole when I accept myself, and when I don't accept myself or deny a certain part of myself, I am not whole. And the idea is to be whole within oneself. And so, does that make sense?
It does, absolutely. For me, at some point, I noticed my default was to not accept myself. And so I sort of have to choose to open that door. And if I get busy or stressed out, I'll forget. And I'll
Okay.
sort of go back to having this very active inner critic that's very hard to live with. So, yeah, that
And
makes
I
a lot of
also, Peg, I also, I mean, I'm constantly uh, reflecting on what's going through my thoughts and whatnot, and just try to stay in the moment and accepting myself and not judging myself or try to be objective and open. Uh, yeah.
Mhm. And it's a process for sure. Okay, so your mother was one of the original NAMI mommies in Toledo, and that's our term at NAMI for the mothers or parents who sit around the kitchen table, either originally in 79 in Madison, Wisconsin, or in any local community, and they start a NAMI to help the families cope with the challenge, the huge challenge of mental illness. Tell us about her journey and how did it impact you?
That's a good question. My mom was always supportive when I was in high school and after high school. We would talk for hours in the evening, late at night, when my siblings and everyone else were sleeping. When Johnny Carson was on, about, what the heck why am I so miserable? Why am I so confused and whatnot? And she was always so very supportive, and I really appreciated those talks. Uh, Later on, I knew that I, she referred me to the position at Neighborhood Properties where I work now, uh, after I had gained some amount of recovery, even though they didn't call it recovery back then. Um, but so I was able to get my career position through her referral in mental health when she was working as a NAMI mommy. And that was before they called it NAMI. They called it Boost, or Building on Our Strengths Together. Um, but one of the things that she did that inspired me, she started a payee program at one of the community centers where folks who couldn't handle their money because of their mental illnesses or were unable to do that, she helped develop a program that had payees that took care of the finances of these individuals. And I know that that's extremely important for a certain population of people with mental illnesses, very vulnerable, who may be unable to live independently, and other folks. But she also, I found very interesting, was that she had a Friday night supper club for all the we call ourselves consumers back then, uh, people in recovery, and she would put on a big dinner that the NAMI people would cook, and all the consumers would gather and on that Friday night at a local church in the basement and sit around and eat and socialize and talk. network and talk with the NAMI volunteers and NAMI staff, and it was a very, very good thing. What I do to honor my mom now, my mom has dementia and doesn't remember me, but she lives in North Carolina, and I have a brother that lives 5 minutes from her. She's in assisted living. I volunteer, and I've been on the NAMI, local Toledo NAMI board for 20 years. Now I run a support group that for people in recovery for NAMI as a volunteer. And I continue to raise money through the NAMI Walks program that we do. Everyone in NAMI does once a year, I think, for the NAMI Walk. So I stay involved with the local NAMI here in her name, and because it meant so much to me that she supported me during that time, and was a NAMI mommy for a lot of different people. So yeah.
Well, thank you for doing so much. It's a beautiful thing to honor your mother in that way. And I know my first connection experience was in your connection group in Toledo. And I think there were 25 people in the room, so it was pretty popular.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Right now, we're not doing it because of the COVID, but we're going to try and start a group of 10 per state guidelines in Ohio. We can't have more than 10 people in a room for a support group, but we're looking for accommodations, a place to have that, because the place where we usually have it doesn't allow 6 feet distance for 10 people. So we're looking for a new place, and we're going to start that up in a month or two.
All right. How would you describe schizophrenia to someone who knows nothing about it?
Mo Armstrong from I think he's in Virginia now, but he's an advocate in mental health, a veteran. He described it, which I like how he does that, is that it's a thinking and feeling disorder. You can see things, feel things, or hear things, which are hallucinations. But I know that I experienced a lot of confusion in my thoughts, and was experienced a lot of paranoia, and a lot of social isolation, loneliness, anxiety, depression along with that. When I went through my psychotic break, I was in New York City, and I had a lot of mystical experiences during that time, and I think I can explain it now, but it's too long of a story. But it certainly is a thinking and feeling disorder, but I think I can make more sense out of it because of my lifespan, and when I look back at what happened, because there's a spiritual aspect to it also. But I know that with my medication and with my ability to work, I'm much grateful for how I am now than when I was not well and when I was in that psychosis in New York City. That was extremely painful, but I thought it was normal at that time.
Mm-hmm. Right. I think mental health, either for the peer or the family member, it really requires you to take this arduous journey, and you come out of it with superpowers, with empathy, with wisdom, but it's, boy, is it a lot of work.
Yeah, to say the least.
Yeah, to say the least. So some family members are not receptive to the idea of taking a family-to-family class or changing their behavior at all. And some folks with mental health challenges are not open to suggestions from their loved ones. For example, take your meds. What advice do you give about communication between family members?
Very, very difficult question, because I have the same problem with the people that we house at neighborhood properties where I work. They won't they refuse to take the meds. All I know is there's no one way to recover, that it's a personal decision, that they have a right to make those decisions. I mean, unless they're a danger to themselves or other people, you have to respect their right to choose. For me, although I had a lot of, like I said, interesting experiences that I couldn't explain that were mystical, I much prefer being able to be in this world. I don't want to call it the real world, but the world where I can work and support myself and be free to come and go as I please.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess it's just listening and trying to be supportive, and encouragement is the only thing I can come up with. There is a condition called anosognosia, which is lack of insight, where I don't know, a percentage of people with severe mental illnesses have that prevents them to think clearly. And there's information in a book called "I Am Not Sick, I Do Not Need Help" by Xavier Amarpour, which is very useful for people with that condition or like that condition. But that's the best I can do with that. That's a very, very difficult question.
It is a difficult question, and I appreciate your heartfelt response to that. I really like what you said about listening and accepting where the person is at. I believe that sometimes the way to influence someone is very counterintuitive, because the minute you accept them, the minute they might hear what you have to say. And when you stop directing them, stop telling them what to do, maybe speak in I statements, or just try to connect them with people who are doing well, they might really be more able to hear you.
And that reminds me, there's a counseling type called motivational interviewing that has been recommended to help people move towards choosing options that maybe benefit to them. So that's something to look at too. There's a lot of material. There's books on it called motivational interviewing.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not an expert in it, but I have had some training in it, and it makes a lot of sense to me.
Mm-hmm. Motivational interviewing, check it out. All right, so what role has art played in your recovery, and can you show us some of your work?
Yes, I can. There's a picture behind me, the most recent one. I'm still working on it. It's not done. I've been drawing with paint and then just filling it in. And there's a picture behind that I want to show you. But painting allowed me to focus. There's a state of mind called flow, which I'm a big fan of, where you can get in through an activity where you are totally absorbed in. And it's either like sports or cooking or playing a musical instrument or housekeeping or reading, anything where you can focus and get feedback on about how well you're doing so you can improve, where you lose track of time, that brings you joy, that you get better at. Well, painting provided that to me in a mental and creative way, where I was able to explore my creativity and put something on canvas that I could see and modify if I needed to. And I really enjoy color, and I enjoy interpreting my paintings because I can be very spontaneous and do action paintings. And then when it's done, because I paint pretty quickly sometimes not, a picture pops out that I just trusted that something would pop out with no intention of what I was doing, just trusting my hand movements. And so it was a lot of fun. I do have a picture upstairs, but it's too big to bring down right now. I'm into my basement right now. But I do have a picture behind the picture here, there, that I want to show you too, okay?
Okay, yeah, please.
You want me to do it now?
Sure, that would be great. And while you're doing that, I'll read a comment from the chat box. Absolutely amazing artwork. I wish I could see the final product. Look at that. I love the blue and the green.
Yeah, you can see
Beautiful.
that.
Nice.
There's a picture of a guy looking down. I don't know if you can see that. Um, there, there. Let me point to it.
Oh, you're kind of in front of the image. Is it sort of in the middle? Okay. It's beautiful. What I'm seeing is it's hard to make out that much detail, but I love the color and the movement of it, the composition.
Yeah, blue and green are my favorite colors. So yeah.
Yeah. And as I mentioned, I was lucky enough to work with Larry in the past, so I'm going to share some images that I already have had on file. Can you see that?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So Larry, if you want me to stop or you want to say anything about these.
Well, this is abstract expressionist right here. The previous ones were kind of cubic.
Okay, so I'll start from so there's cubic.
So that's in the NAMI office right there. That was donated to a NAMI fundraiser auction. And it came back to Toledo like 10 years later. The guy contacted me from Arkansas, and a friend of mine bought it. He mailed it back to us.
Huh. All right, and this one is in the office where you work.
The NAMI office,
Mhm.
where we share, NAMI and NPI share a building and where our offices are.
Right, so that's NAMI Greater Toledo. That's in that office. And then this one.
Yeah, my community mental health center has that one. That's abstract expression.
Okay.
And Zeph Center also has that one. That's a large abstract expression.
I'm a big fan of primary colors. I like that one. I like all of your work.
This one is in the NPI office in the entrance, and it's the color scheme of the wallpaper and carpeting.
Am I right? Was that the blueprint of the building or based on the blueprint of the
That's
building?
correct. That's kind of the blueprint of the building. I work, let's see, I work right here, right now in this corner, right here.
I can't see what you're pointing to. Is it this one? Well, it's top left.
No, bottom right.
Bottom right. Okay. So Larry's in the bottom right, if you can envision that. So that's some of his work. And what medium do you use primarily?
Acrylic.
Acrylic. Wonderful. All kinds of comments in the chat box. Beautiful. Lots of beautifuls. Remarkable. What is the size?
Some of them are 4 by 5 feet, the abstract expression, and some of the cubists. Some are smaller. This is, I think, 3 by 4 feet back here. The problem when I got too big was that I couldn't transport them. I had to get trucks and whatnot. So that's an issue. But art really provided a lot of structure and gave me something to explore and get better at. And then I was able to sell some, so that was fun too. Nothing like making money.
Yeah, one of my favorite art therapists is in Toledo, and she made the comment, art allows you to make structure out of chaos. And I just love that statement. It always stuck with me. And that's what your paintings remind me of too. All right. Well done, Larry. Beautiful work.
Well, thank you very much.
Okay, moving right along. Next question. There are always misconceptions about mental illness. Some people talk about schizophrenia as though it's a superpower or a spiritual gift, and there are experiences that way. You are a talented artist. On the other hand, TV and media might paint a picture of drama or even violence. What do you want people to know about those stereotypes?
Well, they're just that, they're stereotypes. But one of the things that when I used to do public speaking about stigma, I would talk about, and this is what I'm going to bring up here, is that folks with severe mental illness are more likely to be victims of crime than the perpetrators, because so often people with mental illness are stigmatized as being violent and whatnot, and it's just not the truth. And so that's one thing I wanted to share. I think that there are very creative people who have severe mental illness, but there's also a lot of creative people that are just regular people. So, you know, I don't know what else to say about that, but I do feel like I do have a bond and appreciation for people with severe mental illness, regardless of their talents or whatnot, because there's only, you know, a percentage of people in the world with this severe mental illness, and you know, we need to support each other and encourage each other, and we're kind of like a family, I think, in my view.
I just love that statement, and that's what drew me to working at Neighborhood Properties, Inc., where that's the supportive housing agency where Larry currently works, where I met him. I was there for 10 years. And that's what drew me to NAMI too, is that feeling of family, and we're in this together. Because it's incredibly difficult, but we can learn from one another and lean on each other.
Yeah.
All right. I'm so glad you're here, Larry. It's wonderful to see you again.
Well, I'm glad to be here, Peg. And thank you for inviting me.
All right. Last question. What advice do you have for folks who are newly diagnosed and their loved ones?
Recovery happens over a long period of time. I mean, I'm not the same person I was 40 years ago. And there's a lot of ups and downs, a lot of anguish, suffering, but from that you gain insight, resilience, and life experience, and I think you become a better person. And there's always going to be ups and downs. It's just important to reach out for help when you need it, support somebody else who needs it. And just take it a day at a time, ask for help when you need it. But we've all been there. I mean, every one of you know what I'm talking about. You just can't give up. When I get knocked down, I might not get up right away, but I do get up and you know, sometimes I have to baby myself, make my spaghetti and meatballs, and get in some extra sleep. And yeah, so it's a struggle, but it's important to be resilient and to be positive and look at all the perspectives, because sometimes you might need some feedback or take some feedback the wrong way, when in actually the feedback may be just what you need to hear. So a lot of people are oversensitive or very sensitive, or sensitive about being criticized, and that's understandable. But a lot of times you have to look at the opposite view to understand that maybe there is some truth into that. Maybe I could take a look at that and gain some strength from that, or insight into that. Maybe not 100%, but you know, maybe a percentage that is correct. I need to look at all the different perspectives. So just wanted to say that.
Absolutely. And it almost circles back to the self-acceptance point, the acceptance of your new reality, the acceptance of the diagnosis. For me, that just took a very long time, and it was really painful.
Yeah.
Yeah, really tough. So we're going to do something just a little different this week. I'm going to show a video, and then we're going to talk about what's called cemetery reclamation projects, because Larry started the cemetery reclamation project in Toledo, Ohio. So I'm going to share a screen, and this is a brief introduction to cemetery reclamation so that we know what it is. And it is a national movement. Good, and you can hear it. Can y'all hear that? Someone confirm that you can hear it. I can't see the chat box.
We had 2 cemeteries, 768 graves, completely overgrown, jungle-like conditions, tiny numbered markers. That could have been me buried there. I am a member of this group that is so devalued that our society feels that it can discard us as so much rubbish. What we find astonishing is that nobody took the time to even ask these folks, would you want a number or would you want your name?
Look at this day God gave us.
Exactly.
$1 million day, because this is their day.
This is their day.
This is the people's day that are buried here and the ex-patients who did all this.
My name is Stephen Schumann. I am a proud member of the Danvers State Memorial Committee, and I am glad to see so many people here today. The people who are buried in the cemeteries at Danvers State Hospital, being people who were labeled with mental illness and or psychiatric disabilities, they were not considered valuable contributing members of society. Because of this, when they died and were buried here, the respect and dignity they deserved were not given to them.
Okay. Could y'all see and hear that pretty well? Good, okay. I see it in the chat box now. So, yeah, tell me about the Cemetery Reclamation Committee in Toledo and what did that look like and how did you start it?
Well, I was at a seminar in Columbus, and Larry Fricks from Georgia was there talking about the cemetery project that they were working on, which was very successful. It's Midgetville, very, very important, 40,000, I think, severely mentally disabled people who had passed on back a century ago were buried there, and in abandoned cemeteries, and they restored that. So I thought maybe Toledo, because we have a state hospital, might have some cemeteries. So I did some research, and we found there were 2 cemeteries. They weren't abandoned, but they were sold to the Toledo Medical College, Toledo College of Medicine, which is now University of Toledo Medical Campus. So we formed a committee, and we were able to find, there was 2,000 people buried there. They had numbered graves, just like the ones we saw here. And we found the burial log, which gave more information on the people there. And we did a website, and we were able to dig up a lot of the headstones that were eroded under the ground. And we've done some improvements and whatnot. I'm no longer on the committee. I was on the committee for about 12 years, but I'm busy with 2 jobs right now. They just had a ceremony yesterday. They collaborated with a local high school, which is in the backyard of the cemetery. The students raised money and purchased a veterans plaque for a Civil War veteran who died at the state hospital and buried in one of the cemeteries. And so they pledged that. They had a ceremony honoring that, the cemetery and all the people buried there, including that person. So it was on the news. It was, I felt very honored to be part of that committee. and it's still going on. They're still making improvements, and they continue to work. And now the Toledo State Hospital used to be one of the most innovative state hospitals in the country. They had cattle and chickens and horticulture and orchards, fruit orchards, vegetable orchards, and they fed a lot of the food went to the hospital, and they had so much food, which the patients helped farm for therapeutic reasons, to give them something to do, because that was a way of therapy. That they sold a lot of or gave the food to other state hospitals in Ohio. Yeah, Toledo was a very, very innovative hospital. And we had cottages back then, rather than a big monolithic design that you see state hospitals having. So now it's a forensic hospital, and where we have about 125 patients who stay there, and of course a lot of land was sold off to University of Toledo and whatnot. But the website is the Toledo State Hospital Cemetery.org. If anybody wants to go and check out the website, but it's a very, very important. These reclamation committees are going on all across the nation, all across the world, restoring cemeteries right now. Huge movement going on.
Mhm. Yeah. Thank you for that. That's exciting. And I did see that property when I lived in Toledo, and it is very powerful to see these overgrown, very small, maybe 4x4 markers with numbers carved into them. Yeah, it's quite a lot of work. So this is why I think of you as a Renaissance man. You have all these different interests and things that you've done. Tell me what you're reading these days.
A good question. So I haven't been able to read too much, but because of COVID and there's nothing on television, I do read on the weekends. I'm reading Colson Whitehead, the novelist. He's been said to be the best living American writer right now. I'm reading right now The Underground Railroad, and I just finished The Nickel Boys, which was just absolutely a joy to read. Very, very sad, but very beautiful at the same time. I'm also reading a trilogy of historical fiction by Graham Hancock, the archaeologist, about the conquistadors and and when they fought Montezuma in Mexico. I'm in the second book of that trilogy. Very, very interesting. And I had a friend give me a book on the adventures of Sherlock Holmes, which was a lot of fun to read. I have a renewed interest in watching shows that depict Sherlock Holmes now from reading that book. There's also a book I want to share. Let me, it's behind me. I want to show you.
Sure.
It's called The 5 Personality Patterns by Stephen Kessler. And I've had a huge interest in personality inventories, the Myers-Briggs, the Enneagram, because I was so confused and disoriented as a young person. I wanted to know about more of my personality, and it did help me. It did explain a lot. But this book, I always felt like there was something wrong with me. My psychiatrist in family therapy when I was a teenager said that I had discounted myself, and I didn't know what that meant. Well, the chapter in this book does explain that, and it's really helped me understand my flaws and how to cope with that, and the coping technique that I learned to do to deal with trauma as a young person. So I really recommend that book for anybody who's interested in knowing more about personality types and coping. So I just wanted to share that.
Wow, that sounds fascinating. I'll have to check it out. I like all those inventories too. All right, very good. Well, lot to lot to take in there. Thank you so much. And we are going to shift gears now, moving to the question and answer part of our program. First, I want to give a big shout out to the folks working behind the scenes. We've got Virginia Rodias on our chat box, our fabulous intern, Eddie Simmons, doing tech work behind the scenes. And of course, thanks to Gary Kreitz, our executive director, for always being there. And again, thank you, Larry, for being our guest tonight. All right. So it's very helpful if you can put your question in the Q&A box. If you're not familiar with that, it's an icon sort of in the bottom to the bottom left of your monitor, and just says Q&A with some word bubbles above it. Type your question there. It will magically come to myself and Larry. All right, so the first question that came up earlier is, does working in a mental health area help with recovery?
Yes, I think so. With me, this is my personality type. This is my vocational type. I did a vocational inventory assessment, and it said I should be a psychiatric social worker. So it fell right into my talents and whatnot. But even still, now, if you're a peer supporter and can get a certification, you can get employed helping people as a peer supporter, and it just takes caring, insight, and motivation to help people. I had a dependency on marijuana, and I had I have schizophrenia that I'm in recovery from, and I find when I support other people and encourage them that oftentimes I'm encouraged. So I definitely think that's a plus. I think if you're interested in helping people in any way, shape, or form, that working in mental health is a good thing for you, and I encourage that.
I agree completely, and personally, it's really important to me not to have to hide.
Yeah.
So that's enormous. That's a huge factor. Okay, so another question, how is your art different during times when you're feeling stronger and healthier as opposed to times when you're not in a great place?
Well, I don't paint too much anymore. I'm kind of past my prime, but when I was painting, I painted when my energy was high, when I was curious and interested and had a problem or an idea I wanted to work on visually. And once I started the project, I wanted to see it finished. And like I said before, once you get into flow, you're 90% there. And I know that everybody's experienced the flow in one way or another. And the more you can get into flow, the mental state to flow, the better, because you can grow as a person when you're into flow. And so but I understand, I think the question is if I feel like sad and depressed or negative feelings, does that affect my painting? The subject matter, or I think you might have been referring to that. And that's a good question. I think it would change the colors that I was using. I know that when I first started painting in New York, I painted this creature that was out of my imagination. I don't have it anymore. I lost a lot of the paintings when I came back to Toledo from New York. But my brother saw it. He was in New York at the time also. And it was a dark painting, which reflected my confusion and disenchantment and sadness at the time from being socially isolated. Yeah, did I answer your question?
I think that did answer the question very well. Thank you. So this question relates to a gentleman named DJ Jaffe. He's a doctor who died within the past week. He was a big advocate for something called assisted outpatient treatment. But the question is, when you were in New York, did you ever get the chance to meet DJ Jaffe, and or did you know him?
No, I didn't know anything about mental health, mental illness when I was in New York. I was just a young person trying to launch myself into adulthood. I went to a lot of art galleries, museums, and delis. Lived in a room, and I shared the bathroom and kitchen above a coffee warehouse. A lot of roaches were in my unit, but it was the best of times and the worst of times. But I was very sheltered, came from a sheltered family environment, and I was not as well-rounded as I am now, even though I don't think I'm that well-rounded anyway right now, not as much as I would like to be as I see some people. But to each his own. But I was a very sheltered person, and I didn't know anything about mental health. I was reading Bhagwan Sri Rajneesh, who was Nini Guru at the time. I had those hallucinations and could see things, and I did attend some local concerts in New York. Yeah, I had no idea about mental health and mental illness at that time.
Mm-hmm. A lot of people in New York City, that's for sure.
Yeah.
So as a certified peer supporter, do you assist peers with developing a PAD or a psychiatric advance directive? And do you have a PAD?
No, I don't have one, but I understand for some people they're very important and very useful. And I did study that back a few years ago. And but I haven't done a lot of work with that myself. I can't say that I do, but I understand the importance, and we do discuss that with the patients from time to time. But that's a good question. Yeah.
Right, and for those who don't know, a psychiatric advance directive is a document that I would create when I'm feeling good that spells out how I want to be treated when I'm feeling ill and when I need to be hospitalized. So I want this person to visit me, not that person. I can take this medication, but not that medication. Who do I want to watch, my kids or my dog? Very useful document. So good question. Thank you. And this is a creative question. If you were to write a letter to your younger self, Larry, what would you want to tell him?
Hang on. Recovery is long term and goes over a lifetime. That's I feel like I need to write a letter to myself right now, to my younger self. I'm real curious about that, what I would say, but I know that I could not see where I would be 40 years ago. I could see maybe a year or two in advance, and that was it. But I really like the person that I've become, and I'm glad that I gave up marijuana. I'm a much better person, and that makes sense. That's a very therapeutic question that I can use to with the patients at the hospital and our residents that we house for neighborhood properties. That's a very good question. When I did drug rehab to get off the marijuana, one of the questions was to write your what do you call it when you die?
Obituary.
Obituary. So we did do that, but I like your question better. What would I tell my younger self? First thing that comes to mind is that recovery happens over time, because I wanted everything right then and that's not the way it works.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I like that hang on your first instinct. I think my first instinct would be just try to be gentle with yourself. Just
Yeah.
try to give up on beating up on yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so this is a nice question. Where can we purchase your art?
I don't, everything that I've done is either I've given away or sold. I have a few things in my house that I have an emotional attachment to. So I don't have a big inventory, a large inventory, but I appreciate the question. I was into it for uh, for a for the joy of doing that, to see what would turn out. And everything I have is either sold, given away, or unavailable at this point in time. And I have some on different computers, but I'm not a computer guy. I don't know how to do this and do that with old computers that aren't plugged in anymore. So I'm kind of stuck with that. So unfortunately, I don't have a good answer for that.
So they're all limited editions. They're all very exclusive. I think you might have, you need to press your mic on.
Okay, I got it.
Thank you. All right, one more question in the box. And if you have other questions, please get them written down soon or you'll be asked to hold your peace. Did you have to try many different medications before you found one that worked for you?
You know, I was put on one medication, the injection, in 1979 when I got back to Toledo. Well, when I was hospitalized, I was on 3 or 4 different medications. But as I was leaving the hospital, they started me on the injection, and I've been on that injection ever since. It's an old psychotropic called Prolixin, and also known as fluphenamine. I think that's the name of it. So I was really lucky at one medication, and that's all I've been on. They've lowered the dose over time, and it's not expensive. That's another thing. So I really lucked out with that.
Hmm. Yeah, that is wonderful. I'm glad that was easier for you. Okay, a new question has come up. Do you ever go to the Toledo Museum of Art? And if so, do you have a favorite section or a favorite piece?
Yes, I've often been to Toledo Museum of Art. I've gone so much that I haven't gone lately, although I think it's been closed because of COVID. But some of my favorite artists were Cezanne and Picasso, some of the abstract expressionists like de Kooning. But they have Toledo's got a really good art museum. And sometimes I'll go to a 19th century or an 18th century room and spend time and walk around and go to a different room. And, sometimes they have shows. And they also have galleries in Toledo that I attend, and art workshops and what do you call them? Festivals, outdoor festivals. So Toledo is a good art town, and but right now you can see a lot online, and you can go to different museums. I like when I travel to visit museums. So yeah, Toledo's got a really good museum.
Yeah, they're actually world renowned. That question came from Gary Kreitz, and his personal favorite, he's letting us know, is The Architect's Dream by Thomas Cole. All right. And do you have one favorite artist and why? That's from the chat box.
My first favorite artist was Picasso. I loved his cubism. It gave me a structure, and I worked with him, trying not to copy him, but he inspired me. Then I really got into Cezanne, and Cezanne is how I believe Picasso came up with Cubism with Braque by looking at Cézanne's paintings. So those two, but I really like the Andy Warhol also. I like Jean Basquiat. I like, I said, de Kooning and the abstract expressionists. I like people who work with color. So I have a lot of favorite artists, and you never know where you're going to find the next one because you go through magazines and the computer, and there's always somebody new that you didn't know about. Just like authors, you find these new authors. Like I've never heard of Colson Whitehead till recently, and I certainly recommend him as far as reading. But I love art. Art has been a really helped me in my coping and interests with creativity and focusing and then actually doing and trying out. So good question.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm not seeing more questions in the chat box. Sometimes we go the full 90 minutes and sometimes we wrap at 60, just depending on how the energy is flowing and all that good stuff. If you do have a last minute question, please type it in. Larry, is there anything else you want us to know or would like to say?
No, just that it's been a pleasure, and it seems like I've been talking for a couple of hours, but I really enjoyed the process tonight, and the questions were all really good, and I wish I could see you guys in the chat room. And I know I'm bungling all over the with my chair and moving around. I have antiquated equipment, and I have to this microphone I have to be very careful with. So, but yeah, thank you very much for being part of the audience, and I'll stick around if there's any other questions, or we'll see where we go. Okay.
Okay. Well, it's wonderful to see you again, Larry, and you're getting a lot of accolades in the chat box about people enjoying the show, and they're so glad you're here. So our hour has flown by. I want everyone to be well in the week ahead. Please observe social distancing, as always. Go wherever you need to go. Do whatever you need to do, but definitely be safe. And I think that's a wrap. So thanks everyone for joining us. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Peg.